Your report said last week that contracts signed in 2009 will cost the taxpayer an extra £1 billion because banks are charging higher fees for loans following the credit crunch. That's pretty poor value for money, isn't it?
It is pretty questionable value for money. One could argue that it was the right thing to do at that time because the government wanted an economic stimulus in the middle of the credit crunch. But if you take just one of the contracts in that bundle of contracts, the M25 road widening scheme, that's going to cost us an extra 25%, £650 million.
Because?
Half of that is because interest charges were higher. And
but
no more than half.
And
the other bit, just let me say this, the other bit is because actually the risk has transferred from the private sector to the public sector, which is just what it shouldn't be doing with public finance initiatives.
Explain to me, interest rates have gone down, and the base rate's still 0.5%, and these are contracts with government. So, I mean, they're pretty solid contracts. Why would you have a risk premium on the interest rate?
I couldn't agree with you more. These were all negotiated in 2009 in the middle of the credit crunch. And the government argued at the time that they couldn't find money at any lower rate. I think a number of things on that. One, they should now be renegotiating those financial
Can they do
deals.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But two, they didn't take sufficient advantage of two things. One, their clout. I mean, we put a lot of money into the banks. I think that should give us clout. We own them. And the other thing is that there's the European Financial Bank as well, which has lent to some projects elsewhere in Europe during the credit crunch and didn't lend to Britain. And the third point is the point you made, quite rightly. Nothing is more secure than a government contract. And the idea that, therefore, we should be charged so much money, and particularly the risk be transferred, is not acceptable.
£875 for a Christmas tree, £148 for fish and chips for 6 people. It must have been at the Ritz. £963 for a TV aerial in a hospital. I mean, this is the private sector just taking the mick, isn't it?
Well, hang on a second. I mean, what Margaret's excellent report said, which I, agreed with, was that the Treasury was daft to be raising money from the banking system in the middle of the worst banking crisis in the history of the universe. They should have used taxpayers' money direct. That's essentially what you were saying. The £1 billion you were talking about was the difference between what it would have cost them had they borrowed before the credit crunch than it cost them in the middle of the credit crunch. Before the credit crunch, the banks were giving away money. They were lending at absurd rates.
This is the government we're talking about. £875 for a Christmas tree. I mean, it's like the one in Trafalgar Square for that. Rockefeller Centre probably cost less. I mean,
I'm not here to defend Christmas trees.
Go on, give us.
Oh, they have been giving trees. Francis Maud has been arm twisting the whole sector, and actually, I think the number is 800 million that has been agreed over the last 6 months. Yeah, I think this is we've moved beyond this now.
Well, actually, let me make a wider point, which wasn't in our report last week, but we're looking at PFI contracts across the board, and if you think about it, the government has now got something like £200 billion worth of PFI contracts across the board.
Wow.
Sadly, they're sort of very individual. So you've got an individual hospital here, an individual school there. But if you bundle all that together, you should have a lot of negotiating power on behalf of the public sector to get down the costs of maintenance and management, not the capital costs of building the building, but then the costs
running costs.
Running costs. And the private sector, just to say this to you, Andrew, are getting it. They are bundling up these PFI contracts, and you've got an increasing number of financial institutions out there who now own 50, 100 PFIs. They see money in it. What they should do is share some of their profits back with us.
And what the government is now doing is saying, please treat us as a single sovereign customer. So they're saying, bundle up. The government is now doing this. It's happening. Maud is on about it every week.
Would you be happy, therefore, for us to say on the existing PFI contracts, which I do support PFI because it gave us hospitals and schools that we couldn't have had otherwise. But given where we are now, we ought to have a reduction in the maintenance costs.
That's got to be a yes or a no.
Oh, it's a no.
It's a no. I'm sorry. I did my best. I was hoping for a yes.
It should have been a yes.